Her wardrobe's average price tag could cover a month's salary for most of her ground staff. As the founder of Skybridge Airways, luxury brands and designer suits had become Alexandra Reynolds' signature look. But today, dressed in scuffed sneakers, faded jeans, and an oversized university sweatshirt with a coffee stain on the sleeve, she looked like any other budget traveler trying to navigate the morning rush at Denver International Airport. The transformation was part of her annual Sky Level initiative, personally experiencing her airline's service from a passenger's perspective. But nothing in her previous undercover operations could have prepared her for what she witnessed. At Gate A7, that Wednesday morning, the morning sun had barely begun to peek over the Rocky Mountains when Alexandra Reynolds shuffled through the automated doors of Denver International Airport's Terminal A. Her deliberately disheveled appearance was a far cry from the polished executive whose portrait hung in the airline's corporate headquarters downtown. The baseball cap pulled low over her eyes concealed the face that had graced numerous aviation industry magazines as the founder of America's fastest-growing premium airline. At 38, Alexandra had built Skybridge Airways from a two-plane regional carrier into a fleet of 60 aircraft serving 3 continents. Her airline's reputation for exceptional service had earned it the coveted 5-star Skytrax rating, making it one of only 12 airlines worldwide to achieve this distinction. But recent customer satisfaction surveys showed a troubling trend. Complaints about ground staff attitude had increased by 27% in the past quarter, particularly regarding first-class and premium services. The source of these complaints eluded her executive team's investigations. Mystery shopper reports came back glowing, and scheduled audits showed perfect adherence to service protocols. It was as if the problems vanished whenever management was watching. That's when Alexandra decided to revive her Sky Level program, but with a twist. Instead of the usual one-day visit, she would spend 2 full weeks experiencing her airline's service alongside regular passengers. Her transformation had been meticulous. The designer watch was replaced with a basic digital timepiece. Her signature, platinum blonde hair, was hidden under a dark brown wig, styled carelessly to suggest someone who had rushed to catch an early flight. The reading glasses she wore were purely cosmetic, but added years to her appearance. Even her posture was different, the confident stride of a CEO replaced by the slight slouch of a tired traveler. The boarding pass in her hand was for flight. SB 447 to San Francisco, printed with the name Alice Richards. Her cover story was simple but believable. A community college teacher attending an education conference. It was the kind of backstory that typically drew little attention or special treatment from airline staff. As she approached the security checkpoint, Alexandra noticed the first signs that something was off. The premium fast-track lane, a service included with all first-class tickets, was unstaffed. Several passengers in business attire stood waiting, checking their watches with increasing frustration. A handwritten "Use Main Lane" sign had been taped to the barrier, despite company policy strictly prohibiting such improvised signage. She joined the main security line, using the time to observe the staff interactions. A young TSA agent was being unnecessarily curt with an elderly passenger who was struggling to remove his shoes. A Skybridge Airways ground staff member walked past, clearly saw the situation, but made no effort to assist. Another violation of the airline's proactive service mandate. Making her way to Gate A7 after clearing security, Alexandra settled into a seat with a clear view of the gate desk. She pulled out a worn paperback, picked up from a second-hand bookstore to complete her disguise, but her attention was focused on the unfolding scene before her. The first-class lounge entrance was visible from her position, and what she observed made her blood pressure rise. A well-dressed man in his 50s approached the lounge entrance, first-class boarding pass in hand. The gate agent, whose name? Tag read Marcus, barely glanced at the ticket before shaking his head. "Sorry, lounge is at capacity," he said, his tone suggesting he was anything but sorry. Alexandra knew this was impossible. The lounge occupancy system on her phone showed it at only 40% capacity. The passenger, maintaining his composure, pointed out that first-class lounge access was a guaranteed benefit. Marcus's response was both shocking and illuminating. "Well, perhaps you should have arrived earlier. There are plenty of seats in the main terminal area." The dismissive wave that accompanied these words violated every service standard Skybridge Airways was built upon. As she watched more interactions, a pattern emerged. Passengers who looked the part of premium travelers, expensive luggage, designer clothing, certain demographics, were welcomed into the lounge without question. Others, despite holding valid first-class tickets, were turned away with various excuses. The discrimination was subtle enough to avoid obvious detection, but systematic enough to explain the surge in complaints. Alexandra felt her jaw tighten. She had built Skybridge Airways on the principle that premium service should be based on the class of ticket purchased, not the appearance of the passenger. What she was witnessing wasn't just poor customer service. It was the complete antithesis of her airline's core values. She pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages, while actually documenting times, names, and incidents. The next 2 weeks would reveal whether this was an isolated problem or symptomatic of a deeper cultural issue. Either way, Alexandra Reynolds was about to orchestrate a test that would shake her airline's service standards to their very foundation. Part 2. Observation Trigger and First Discovery. Alexandra's first flight as Alice Richards revealed more troubling patterns. From her economy-class seat, deliberately booked despite her first-class ticket to observe the entire boarding process, she watched the cabin crew's interactions with increasing concern. The same gate agent, Marcus, had moved from the lounge to handle the boarding process, bringing his discriminatory behavior with him. A young woman in a hijab presented her first-class boarding pass. Marcus scrutinized it with exaggerated care, holding up the growing line while he supposedly verified something in the computer system. "There seems to be a problem with your ticket," he announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "You'll need to step aside while we sort this out." Alexandra's trained eye could see the boarding pass from her position. There was nothing wrong with it. The woman, who later introduced herself as Dr. Amira Hassan, handled the situation with remarkable dignity. "I've flown first class with Skybridge Airways many times," she explained quietly. "I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon heading to a conference in San Francisco." Only after she produced her medical credentials did Marcus grudgingly allow her to board, without the apology that Skybridge's service protocol mandated. The incident sparked something in Alexandra's memory. Last month's customer feedback data had shown a curious anomaly. Complaints about boarding delays were disproportionately higher from passengers with non-Western names. At the time, her team had attributed it to statistical noise. Now she wasn't so sure. As boarding continued, Alexandra noticed another disturbing trend. The flight attendant greeting passengers at the aircraft door, whose name tag read Sarah, showed markedly different levels of enthusiasm depending on the passenger's appearance. Designer handbags received warm smiles and offers of pre-flight champagne. Those in well-worn clothing got perfunctory nods, if they were acknowledged at all. But it was what happened next that truly caught Alexandra's attention. An elderly man with weathered hands and a simple wool sweater approached the first-class cabin. His ticket was valid. Alexandra had personally reviewed the passenger manifest on her hidden company phone, but Sarah immediately challenged his presence. "Sir, I believe you may be in the wrong cabin," Sarah said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Economy class is towards the rear of the aircraft." The man, who Alexandra's manifest identified as James Chen, produced his boarding pass with trembling hands. "I saved up for this ticket," he said softly. "It's my grandson's medical school graduation in San Francisco." Sarah examined the boarding pass as if expecting to find a forgery. Finding nothing to justify her suspicion, she reluctantly gestured him through, but not before loudly announcing, "Remember, in first class, we expect passengers to adhere to certain standards of behavior." Several nearby passengers looked away, embarrassed by the obvious discrimination. Alexandra felt her chest tighten with anger. She'd grown up in a working-class family in rural Colorado, watching her parents save every penny to occasionally treat themselves to better seats on their rare vacations. Her airline was supposed to be different. She'd written the service manifesto herself. "Every passenger deserves to be treated like a VIP, regardless of appearance, background, or circumstance." Throughout the flight, she observed more subtle forms of discrimination. Premium cabin flight attendants were markedly slower to respond to call buttons from passengers who didn't fit their preconceived notion of a first-class traveler. Drink refills were offered more frequently to some passengers than others. Even the distribution of hot towels showed bias. Some passengers received freshly warmed towels, while others got ones that had clearly been sitting out. Using her cover as a chatty teacher, Alexandra engaged various crew members in conversation during quiet moments. Their responses revealed a culture of assumptions and prejudices that had somehow taken root despite her company's explicit policies against such behavior. "You can usually tell the real first-class passengers from the ones who just got lucky with an upgrade," one flight attendant confided, unaware that she was speaking to the airline's founder. "The ones who belong here know how to act." The statement made Alexandra's blood boil, but she maintained her facade, encouraging more revelations. During the beverage service, she overheard Sarah speaking to another flight attendant in the galley. "Did you see the guy in 2A? Probably used points or got a deal. These discount first-class tickets are ruining the experience for our real premium passengers." The other attendant nodded in agreement, adding, "At least he's quiet. Remember last week's flight with that family? They actually brought their own snacks into first class." As the plane cruised over Nevada, Alexandra pulled out her laptop, a mid-range model chosen to match her cover story, and began documenting everything she'd observed. The problem wasn't just with ground staff, it had infected the entire service culture. Somewhere along the line, her vision of inclusive luxury had been corrupted into an elitist system of judgment and discrimination. But amid the troubling observations, she noticed something else. A junior flight attendant named David consistently treated all passengers with equal respect. He was new, his trainee badge gave that away, but his natural warmth and genuine desire to help shone through with every interaction. Here was someone who embodied the true spirit of Skybridge Airways, someone who could be part of the solution she was already formulating in her mind. As the flight began its descent into San Francisco, Alexandra knew this was just the beginning. She'd scheduled 2 weeks of undercover travel, and her next flight would test whether these problems were isolated to one route or indicative of a broader cultural issue. What she discovered today demanded more than just corrective action. It required a complete overhaul of how Skybridge Airways approached customer service. Part 3. Silent Observation Phase. Over the next 3 days, Alexandra expanded her investigation beyond first-class lounges and premium cabins. Disguised as Alice Richards, she explored every aspect of Skybridge Airways' passenger experience, from check-in counters to baggage claim. The pattern of discrimination she'd witnessed on her first flight wasn't an isolated incident. It was merely the tip of an iceberg of systemic bias. At Chicago O'Hare, she watched a check-in agent named Patricia expertly manipulate seat assignments, ensuring that certain passengers, those she deemed undesirable, based on appearance or ethnicity, were kept away from the front of the aircraft, even when they'd paid for premium seats. The agent's subtle keyboard movements might have gone unnoticed by most, but Alexandra had personally designed Skybridge's reservation system. She recognized the sequence used to override automatic seat assignments. "It's about maintaining the right atmosphere," Patricia explained to a trainee during a quiet moment, unaware that her supposedly casual conversation was being carefully documented. "Our premium passengers expect a certain environment. They don't want to sit next to someone who bought a discounted ticket or used points." The trainee nodded eagerly, absorbing lessons that went against everything Alexandra had built her airline to represent. But it wasn't all discouraging. At Denver's main terminal, Alexandra observed a supervisor named Michael Rodriguez handling a complex situation with exactly the kind of integrity she'd envisioned for her company. A family had arrived at the gate, grandmother in a wheelchair, parents juggling carry-ons, 3 young children in tow. Their economy tickets had been purchased with points earned through countless business trips. When a first-class passenger failed to show up for the flight, Michael didn't follow the usual protocol of upgrading the highest-tier frequent flyer. Instead, he approached the family. "Your grandmother will be more comfortable with the extra space," he explained, processing the upgrade with a warm smile. "And it looks like you could all use a bit more room to manage the little ones." Alexandra watched as Michael helped the family board, personally ensuring the wheelchair was properly stored. He treated them with the same respect and attention he showed to full-fare first-class passengers, demonstrating that true premium service wasn't about judging worthiness, but about recognizing and meeting human needs. During a layover in Atlanta, she spent hours in the general terminal areas, observing the subtle ways staff interactions varied based on passengers' appearance. The differences were stark. Passengers in business attire received prompt, detailed responses to their questions. Those in casual clothes often faced delays or were directed to automated kiosks instead of receiving personal assistance. A particularly revealing moment came when she witnessed a heated exchange at Gate B23. A passenger in worn jeans and a faded T-shirt was attempting to use a first-class lounge pass he'd received as a credit card benefit. The lounge attendant, Brandon, was doing everything possible to deny him entry without explicitly violating policy. "The lounge is quite full at the moment," Brandon said, despite the visible empty seats behind him. "And we need to verify the authenticity of your pass. The system seems to be running slowly today." His tone carried the unmistakable implication that the passenger didn't belong. What Brandon didn't know, but Alexandra did, thanks to her hidden company phone, was that the passenger in question was Dr. James Morrison, a leading humanitarian surgeon who spent most of the year performing life-saving operations in conflict zones. His casual appearance reflected a life dedicated to service rather than status. Yet here he was, being judged by the very superficial standards Alexandra had fought to eliminate from her airline's culture. The incident with Dr. Morrison crystallized something Alexandra had been struggling to articulate. The problem wasn't just discriminatory behavior, it was a fundamental misunderstanding of what luxury service meant. Somewhere along the line, her employees had conflated expensive appearances with value as a customer. That evening, settled into another economy seat for a flight to Seattle, Alexandra reviewed her growing collection of notes. The pattern was clear. While official policies promoted equality and respect, an unofficial culture of judgment and bias had taken root. But there were also bright spots. Employees like Michael Rodriguez and the junior flight attendant David. From her first flight, who seemed to naturally understand that true premium service was about dignity, not discrimination. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Alexandra began drafting preliminary plans for what would become the most significant overhaul in Skybridge Airways history. But first, she needed to understand how deep the problem went. She opened her laptop and began composing an email to her most trusted executive assistant, Janet Porter. "Need your help setting up a series of tests," she wrote, using her personal email to maintain her cover. "Time to see how our service culture responds under pressure." The plan, forming in her mind, would either expose the full extent of the discrimination or reveal unexpected champions of the inclusive luxury she'd always envisioned for Skybridge Airways. Tomorrow, she would begin phase 2 of her investigation, actively testing the system she'd spent days observing. As the cabin lights dimmed for the overnight flight, Alexandra smiled to herself. Her employees had no idea that their biggest challenge was about to walk through their doors, wearing scuffed sneakers and a coffee-stained sweatshirt. Bree, Part 4. Professional Excellence and Hidden Strengths. The next phase of Alexandra's investigation began at Los Angeles International Airport's Terminal 6, where Skybridge Airways' largest West Coast hub operation was based. Her email to Janet had set several tests in motion, and now she watched as the first one unfolded before her. A group of passengers approached the first-class check-in counter, participants carefully selected and briefed by Janet. They represented a deliberately diverse cross-section: a young tech entrepreneur in ripped jeans and a hoodie, a Middle Eastern businessman in a bespoke suit, an elderly woman in modest clothing, and a famous actress known for her luxury lifestyle. From her position in the general waiting area, Alexandra observed the stark differences in how each was treated. The actress was immediately recognized and pampered with attention, while the elderly woman was repeatedly asked to verify her first-class ticket. The tech entrepreneur faced subtle suggestions that he might be more comfortable in the main terminal, despite his valid premium credentials. But it was the treatment of station manager Thomas Wright that truly caught Alexandra's attention. As she watched the scene unfold, she saw something that gave her hope for Skybridge's future. Thomas had been with the airline since its early days, though Alexandra had never directly interacted with him. His approach to the developing situation showed exactly the kind of leadership she'd always envisioned for her company. Upon noticing the discriminatory treatment, he immediately stepped in, pulling the check-in staff aside for a quiet but firm conversation. "Every passenger holding a first-class ticket has earned their right to be there," Alexandra overheard him saying. "Our job is to provide excellence, not judgment." His intervention transformed the atmosphere. The staff's attitude shifted, and suddenly all passengers received the same high level of service, regardless of their appearance. Later that afternoon, Alexandra orchestrated another test. Using her teacher persona, she approached Thomas with a complex issue, a deliberately convoluted story about needing to change her flight due to a family emergency, despite holding a highly restricted ticket. Thomas's response was revealing. Instead of dismissing her or quoting policy, he listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions to understand her situation. "Let me see what I can do to help," he said, spending the next 20 minutes exploring options. Though he couldn't completely waive the change fee that would have violated company policy, he found a creative solution that minimized her costs while ensuring she could make her supposedly urgent connection. What impressed Alexandra most wasn't just his willingness to help, but his consistent behavior. She watched as he showed the same dedication to every passenger who approached him, from a frantically rushing business executive to a nervous first-time flyer in weathered clothing. During a quiet moment, Alexandra struck up a conversation with him, curious about his perspective on premium service. "I started in aviation washing planes," Thomas shared, unaware he was speaking to his airline's founder. "Learned pretty quickly that the price of someone's ticket doesn't define their worth. I've seen millionaires throw tantrums over minor delays, and people who saved for years to fly first-class handle problems with incredible grace." His words resonated with Alexandra's original vision for Skybridge Airways. This was someone who inherently understood that luxury service wasn't about catering to wealth. It was about recognizing and respecting human dignity. As the day progressed, Alexandra witnessed Thomas handling various challenges with the same steady professionalism. When a flight delay threatened to disrupt dozens of connections, he proactively reorganized gate assignments to minimize passenger inconvenience. When a family was separated by a booking error, he rearranged seat assignments himself instead of delegating the task. But most tellingly, Alexandra observed how Thomas mentored his staff. During less busy periods, he took time to teach newer employees, emphasizing the importance of consistent service standards. "We're not here to judge who deserves premium service," she heard him explain to a group of trainees. "We're here to provide it to everyone who walks through those doors." His leadership style had created a noticeable pocket of excellence within the broader systemic issues Alexandra had observed. The staff under Thomas's direct supervision showed markedly less bias in their interactions with passengers, regardless of appearance or background. That evening, Alexandra asked Janet to pull Thomas's employment records. His performance metrics were exceptional. His terminal consistently ranked highest in customer satisfaction scores, with remarkably few discrimination complaints. Yet he'd never been promoted beyond station manager, possibly because his approach didn't align with the elitist culture that had taken root in upper management. As she compiled her notes in her hotel room that night, Alexandra began to see how Thomas could be key to the changes she envisioned. Here was someone who not only embodied the airline's original values, but actively worked to instill them in others. His methods could serve as a model for the systemic changes needed throughout the organization. But first, she needed to understand why his example hadn't naturally spread through the company. Tomorrow's tests would focus on the barriers between exceptional employees, like Thomas, and the broader culture that seemed resistant to their influence. Alexandra suspected that the answer would reveal much about how Skybridge Airways had strayed from its founding principles. Part 5. The Test. Set up. The following morning, Alexandra initiated the most ambitious phase of her investigation. Working with Janet through secure channels, she orchestrated a series of coordinated challenges that would test Skybridge Airways' service culture under pressure. The plan would either expose the full extent of the discrimination or reveal unexpected allies in her quest to restore the airline's original values. At New York's JFK Terminal 8, where Skybridge operated its premium East Coast hub, Janet had arranged for a group of actors to pose as wealthy investors interested in purchasing a significant stake in the airline. The twist? These investors would arrive dressed in casual clothing, speaking English as a second language, displaying none of the typical markers of wealth that seemed to guarantee premium service. Alexandra positioned herself in the first-class lounge, still maintaining her teacher disguise as the first group arrived. Their appearance immediately triggered the discriminatory behavior she'd come to expect. The lounge attendant, Victoria, barely glanced at their executive platinum cards before claiming the lounge was invitation only for special events today. What Victoria didn't know was that these investors had been thoroughly briefed on Skybridge's service policies. They politely but firmly quoted the exact terms of their membership benefits, making it increasingly difficult for Victoria to maintain her exclusionary stance without explicitly violating company policy. The situation grew more complex when Thomas Wright, who had been temporarily transferred to JFK as part of Alexandra's carefully orchestrated plan, noticed the commotion. His approach to the situation would prove crucial to Alexandra's understanding of how positive change could spread within the organization. "Is there a problem here?" Thomas asked, his calm professionalism a stark contrast to Victoria's barely concealed disdain. Before Victoria could respond, one of the investors, actually a respected business consultant named Dr. Chen, explained the situation. Thomas's response was immediate and exemplary. Not only did he welcome the group into the lounge, but he also took the time to personally ensure their comfort, demonstrating exactly the kind of service Alexandra had always envisioned for her. Airline. Victoria's reaction to Thomas's intervention was telling. Initially defensive, she began to shift her approach as she observed his interactions with the guests. By the end of her shift, Alexandra noticed subtle changes in how Victoria treated other passengers who didn't fit her preconceived notion of first class. But the real test was yet to come. Alexandra had arranged for a second group of actors to arrive during the peak afternoon rush. This time, they would present themselves as a family who had won their first-class tickets through a charity raffle, a scenario designed to challenge the staff's prejudices about who deserved premium service. The family arrived looking travel-worn and obviously out of place in the premium terminal. Their young children were excited and somewhat loud, their luggage was well used, and their uncertainty about first-class procedures was evident. Alexandra watched as the same staff who had been schooled by Thomas earlier now faced a new test of their adaptability. The response was mixed. Some employees, clearly influenced by Thomas's earlier example, stepped up to provide genuine assistance. Others reverted to their discriminatory habits, exchanging knowing looks and providing minimal service. The contrast between these approaches created a natural experiment in how different service philosophies affected the passenger experience. Throughout the day, Alexandra documented every interaction, paying particular attention to how different staff members influenced their colleagues' behavior. She noticed that those who worked directly with Thomas began to mirror his inclusive approach, while those at greater organizational distance maintained their biased practices. The most revealing moment came during a manufactured crisis. Janet had arranged for a series of delayed flights to create pressure on the lounge facilities. As space grew tight, Alexandra watched how staff decided which passengers to accommodate and which to divert to the main terminal. The patterns were clear. Despite holding identical premium credentials, passengers who fit the traditional luxury traveler image were consistently given priority. However, in areas under Thomas's direct supervision, a different standard prevailed, one based on factors like connection times and travel needs rather than appearances or perceived status. As evening approached, Alexandra received a text from Janet that made her smile. The investors had submitted detailed reports of their experiences, providing valuable documentation of both discriminatory behavior and exemplary service. More importantly, they had identified specific employees who, like Thomas, naturally aligned with Skybridge's original values. But Alexandra wasn't satisfied with just identifying the problem and its potential solutions. She needed to understand why the airline's culture had diverged so dramatically from its founding principles. Tomorrow, she would implement the final phase of her plan, a series of challenges that would test not just individual employees, but the entire organizational structure that enabled discriminatory practices to flourish. In her hotel room that night, Alexandra finalized the details of what would become the most ambitious corporate culture intervention in aviation history. The next day's events would either expose the deep-rooted prejudices that had infected her airline or reveal the path to restoring Skybridge's commitment to truly inclusive luxury service. Part 6. Character response and crisis point. The next morning brought the most challenging phase of Alexandra's investigation. She'd arranged for a scenario that would push Skybridge's service culture to its breaking point, a deliberate convergence of high-profile passengers, operational pressures, and ethical dilemmas that would force staff to reveal their true colors. The day began with an unexpected snowstorm at Chicago O'Hare, causing a cascade of delays across Skybridge's network. As flights backed up, the airline's premium terminals faced an unprecedented surge of displaced first-class passengers. Alexandra had secretly orchestrated some of these delays, but the weather had added an element of genuine chaos that made the test even more revealing. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Janet deployed the final group of undercover observers. This time, real high-net-worth individuals who had agreed to participate in Alexandra's experiment. Unlike previous tests, these participants were actual billionaires, CEOs, and influential figures who had collaborated with Alexandra in the past. Their mission was to advocate not for themselves, but for other passengers they observed being discriminated against. The first major incident occurred when tech billionaire Mark Chen, dressed in cargo shorts and a faded T-shirt, witnessed the lounge staff trying to turn away a family with valid first-class tickets. Instead of revealing his own status, he began quietly documenting the interaction on his phone, gathering evidence for Alexandra's investigation. Meanwhile, Thomas Wright had been strategically positioned at JFK's premium terminal, where his leadership would be tested in new ways. Alexandra watched as he handled a particularly challenging situation. A group of international passengers with limited English proficiency were being systematically excluded from premium services despite their platinum status. The breaking point came when a delayed flight from London brought an unexpected surge of passengers to the first-class lounge. Among them was Sarah Martinez, one of the discriminatory flight attendants Alexandra had observed earlier in her investigation. Now, as a deadheading crew member, Sarah found herself on the receiving end of the very behavior she had previously exhibited. Dressed in casual clothes for her positioning flight, Sarah was initially denied access to the crew rest area by lounge staff who didn't believe she was really a Skybridge employee. The irony wasn't lost on Alexandra, who watched the scene unfold from behind her laptop screen. Thomas, witnessing the situation, intervened in his characteristically professional manner, but instead of simply resolving the immediate issue, he took the opportunity to deliver a subtle but powerful lesson. "You know," he said to the lounge staff within Sarah's hearing, "I've learned that our uniform doesn't make us who we are. It's how we treat others that defines us." The message wasn't lost on Sarah, whose expression showed the first signs of recognition about her own behavioral patterns. Throughout the day, Alexandra observed Sarah watching Thomas's interactions with passengers, noticing how his consistent respect and professionalism yielded better results than her previous discriminatory approach. As the crisis deepened, Alexandra implemented the final phase of her test. Janet had arranged for several of the undercover billionaire observers to approach different staff members with a provocative offer. In exchange for preferential treatment and bumping less deserving passengers from the overbooked first-class cabin, they would provide glowing feedback to senior management. The responses to this ethical challenge varied dramatically. Some staff members eagerly accepted the opportunity, revealing how deeply the culture of discrimination had taken root. Others politely declined, but did nothing to prevent their colleagues from engaging in such behavior. Then there was Thomas. When approached with the same offer, his response was immediate and unequivocal. "I apologize," he said firmly, "but at Skybridge Airways, every passenger's comfort and dignity is equally important. I cannot and will not prioritize one guest over another based on anything other than their travel needs." What happened next would become a turning point in Alexandra's investigation. One of the authentic billionaire participants, moved by Thomas's integrity, decided to break protocol. She revealed her true identity, not to expose the test, but to publicly support Thomas's stance. "This is exactly how luxury service should work," she announced loudly enough for other staff to hear. It's not about catering to wealth or status. It's about maintaining standards of excellence for everyone. The impact of this moment rippled through the terminal. Staff members who had been engaging in discriminatory practices suddenly found themselves confronted with a wealthy passenger advocating for equal treatment. The cognitive dissonance was palpable. Alexandra watched as the dynamics shifted. Sarah, who had spent the day observing these interactions, approached Thomas during a quiet moment. "I think I've been doing this all wrong," she admitted. "I always thought premium service meant catering to a certain type of passenger, but watching you today, you treat everyone like they're valuable." "Because they are," Thomas replied simply. "Our job isn't to judge who deserves to be here. It's to ensure that everyone who walks through those doors experiences the best of what aviation can offer." As the day drew to a close, Alexandra realized she had witnessed something extraordinary. The crisis had revealed not just the problems within her airline's culture, but also the potential solutions. Thomas's leadership had demonstrated that change was possible, while Sarah's transformation showed that even those deeply embedded in the discriminatory culture could learn a better way. Tomorrow, Alexandra would begin the process of revealing her true identity. But first, she needed to document one final observation: how the staff would behave when they thought no one was watching. The night shift would provide the perfect opportunity for this last crucial test. Part 7. The Final Test and Pre-Revelation. The overnight shift at JFK's Terminal 8 presented Alexandra with her last opportunity to observe Skybridge's service culture in its most unguarded state. With reduced passenger traffic and minimal supervision, staff tendencies would be most apparent when they thought no one of consequence was watching. Alexandra had arranged for Janet to implement one final series of tests, this time focusing on passengers arriving on red-eye flights, when fatigue and reduced oversight often led to more pronounced behavioral patterns. The terminal was quieter now, the usual bustle replaced by the soft hum of cleaning equipment and occasional announcements echoing through near-empty corridors. The first test subject arrived at 2 a.m., an elderly gentleman in wrinkled clothing, deliberately chosen to challenge staff preconceptions. His first-class ticket was legitimate, but his appearance suggested someone who might have been upgraded rather than a full-fare premium passenger. What the staff didn't know was that he was Robert Chen, one of Asia's most successful tech entrepreneurs, who had agreed to participate in Alexandra's final evaluation. The night shift supervisor, Kevin Matthews, was handling the premium check-in desk. His reaction to Robert would prove crucial to Alexandra's understanding of how deeply the discriminatory culture had penetrated different levels of the organization. She watched from her position in the dimly lit waiting area, appearing to doze but keenly observing every interaction. Kevin's initial response followed the unfortunate pattern she'd observed throughout her investigation. He barely glanced at Robert's documentation, suggesting with poorly concealed condescension that perhaps he was at the wrong counter. "The economy check-in is in the main terminal," he said, despite the clearly visible first-class ticket in Robert's hand. What happened next demonstrated the ripple effect of Thomas Wright's influence. Sarah Martinez, who had been profoundly affected by her experiences during the day shift, was working an unusual overnight rotation as part of Alexandra's carefully orchestrated staffing adjustments. She overheard the exchange and, in a moment that validated Alexandra's hopes for cultural change, intervened. "Sir," Sarah addressed Robert with genuine respect, "please allow me to assist you with check-in. Your first-class lounge access card will be printed with your boarding pass." The transformation in her behavior from just days ago was remarkable. She proceeded to provide the exact level of service Alexandra had always envisioned for her airline. Attentive, respectful, and completely blind to superficial appearances, Kevin's reaction to Sarah's intervention was telling. Initially defensive, his expression shifted to confusion as he watched her interact with Robert. The genuine appreciation in Robert's eyes, the natural flow of their conversation, and the obvious rightness of treating every passenger with dignity began to crack Kevin's preconceptions. Throughout the night, Alexandra observed similar small but significant moments of transformation. The staff who had worked alongside Thomas during the day shift had begun spreading his philosophy to their colleagues, creating pockets of excellence that were slowly influencing the broader culture. Around 3 a.m., Janet's final test began to unfold. A group of passengers from a delayed international flight arrived at the terminal. Their appearances and demeanors deliberately varied. Among them was Maria Santos, another of Alexandra's covert participants, dressed in casual travel clothes, but carrying a first-class ticket. What made this test unique was that Maria was actually a former flight attendant who had worked for various luxury airlines. She knew every service standard and policy by heart, but presented herself as an inexperienced traveler, uncertain about premium service protocols. The night staff's response to this diverse group would determine whether the changes Alexandra had observed were sustainable or merely superficial. She watched as Sarah, now fully embracing her role as an advocate for equal service, guided her colleagues toward better behavior through example rather than confrontation. "Remember what Thomas showed us," she overheard Sarah telling a younger colleague. "Premium service isn't about who deserves it. It's about delivering excellence to everyone who walks through those doors." The most revealing moment came when Kevin, who had witnessed these interactions throughout his shift, faced a decision point. A casually dressed young woman approached his counter with a first-class ticket. Alexandra held her breath, watching, to see if the earlier experiences had affected his behavior. Kevin hesitated for a moment, his ingrained biases visibly wrestling with the new perspective he'd been exposed to. Then, in a moment that brought a smile to Alexandra's face, he straightened his posture and offered the kind of genuine welcome she'd always wanted Skybridge to be known for. As dawn approached, Alexandra reviewed her notes one final time. The transformation she'd witnessed, particularly in Sarah and Kevin, proved that change was possible. Thomas's influence had shown how strong leadership could reshape cultural norms, while the night shift's evolution demonstrated that these changes could take root even without direct supervision. Tomorrow would bring the moment of revelation. Alexandra had already instructed Janet to arrange an emergency staff meeting for all terminal personnel. But first, she had one more task to complete. Opening her laptop, she began drafting 2 documents: a comprehensive plan for systemic change within Skybridge Airways, and a series of promotions and policy changes that would ensure the positive transformations she'd witnessed would become permanent rather than temporary. The sun was rising over the runway as Alexandra closed her laptop, its first rays catching the wings of arriving aircraft. In a few hours, she would shed her disguise and reclaim her identity as Skybridge's owner. The reactions to that revelation would be interesting, but what really mattered was what would come after. The systematic rebuilding of an airline culture that truly embodied the principles of inclusive luxury she'd always envisioned. Barson Part 8, The Revelation. The emergency staff meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. in Terminal 8's largest conference room. As employees filed in, speculation about the reason for this unusual gathering filled the air. Some worried about potential layoffs. Others wondered if the airline had been sold. None suspected that the quiet teacher in worn sneakers and a coffee-stained sweatshirt, sitting unobtrusively in the corner, was about to transform their understanding of leadership and service. Janet Porter, Alexandra's executive assistant, had orchestrated the meeting perfectly. Key players from Alexandra's investigation were all present. Thomas Wright, whose exemplary leadership had shown the way forward. Sarah Martinez, whose transformation exemplified the possibility of change, Kevin Matthews, whose overnight shift had revealed the beginning of a cultural shift, and Victoria from the first-class lounge, whose discriminatory practices had initially sparked the investigation. The room grew quiet as Janet stepped to the podium. "Before we begin," she announced, "I'd like to introduce someone." She gestured toward Alexandra, who stood and walked to the front of the room. As she moved, her posture changed, shedding the deliberate slouch of Alice Richards and assuming the confident bearing of a CEO. "Some of you know me as Alice," she began, removing her wig and glasses, "but most of you know me from a portrait in the lobby." The transformation was dramatic. Gone was the disheveled teacher, replaced by the unmistakable presence of Alexandra Reynolds, founder and owner of Skybridge Airways. The reaction rippled through the room like a shockwave. Victoria's face drained of color as she remembered her treatment of various unworthy first-class passengers. Kevin Matthews sank lower in his chair, recalling his initial interaction with Robert Chen. But it was Thomas Wright's expression that caught Alexandra's attention. A small, knowing smile that suggested he might have suspected something all along. "For the past 2 weeks," Alexandra continued, "I've experienced our airline the way our passengers do. I've witnessed moments of extraordinary service that made me proud." She nodded toward Thomas. "And I've seen behaviors that betrayed everything Skybridge Airways was built to represent." She proceeded to outline specific incidents, not to shame individuals, but to illustrate patterns. The systematic exclusion of passengers based on appearance, the subtle discrimination in service delivery, the creation of artificial barriers for those who didn't fit a preconceived image of luxury travel. "But I've also seen hope," she added, her gaze finding Sarah Martinez. "I've watched members of our team learn and grow, challenging their own assumptions and choosing to embody the true spirit of premium service." Sarah sat straighter, a mix of embarrassment and pride crossing her face as she remembered her own journey. Alexandra moved away from the podium, walking among the assembled staff. "When I founded this airline, I had a vision. Luxury wasn't about catering to wealth or status. It was about providing excellence to everyone who chose to fly with us. Somewhere along the way, that vision became distorted." She paused near Thomas's seat. "However, some of you never lost sight of what premium service really means. Mr. Wright, your leadership has demonstrated exactly what Skybridge Airways should be. Your consistent respect for every passenger, regardless of their appearance or background, will become the model for our entire organization." Alexandra then revealed the changes that would begin immediately. Thomas Wright was being promoted to Director of Service Culture with a mandate to reshape training and operations across the network. Sarah Martinez would assist him, using her personal experience of transformation to help others recognize and overcome their biases. "But these changes go beyond individual promotions," Alexandra continued. "Starting today, we're implementing a complete overhaul of our service protocols." She outlined a new program called Skybridge Standard, a comprehensive approach to ensuring consistent, respectful service for all passengers. The program included anonymous testing, similar to what she'd conducted, regular cultural audits, and a new feedback system that would track subtle patterns of discrimination. More importantly, it introduced a mentorship system pairing experienced staff members who exemplified the right values with those who needed guidance. "This isn't just about avoiding discrimination," Alexandra emphasized. "It's about redefining luxury air travel. True premium service isn't about judging who deserves it, it's about delivering excellence to everyone who walks through our doors." She then addressed the elephant in the room: accountability. There would be consequences for continued discriminatory behavior, but also support and training for those willing to change. Like Sarah and Kevin have shown us, recognition of Past mistakes, coupled with a genuine desire to improve, will be valued and rewarded. The meeting concluded with Alexandra sharing her own background, growing up in a working-class family, saving for occasional flights, experiencing the sting of prejudice in premium cabins. "I built Skybridge Airways to be different," she said. "Today, we begin the process of fully realizing that vision." As the staff filed out, Alexandra noticed small groups forming, processing what they'd heard. Thomas was already surrounded by colleagues seeking guidance, while Sarah engaged in earnest conversation with Victoria about her own journey to better service. Janet approached with a tablet displaying real-time feedback from other terminals where the recorded meeting had been broadcast. The response was overwhelming. Staff across the network were reaching out, sharing their own stories and committing to change. Alexandra smiled, knowing this was just the beginning. The real work of transformation would take time, but the foundation had been laid. Skybridge Airways was about to redefine luxury air travel, not through exclusivity, but through genuine universal excellence. Part 9, the transformation begins. The hours following Alexandra's revelation brought a whirlwind of activity across Skybridge Airways' network. As news of the undercover investigation spread, terminals across the country buzzed with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Alexandra had given her staff 24 hours to process the changes before the new protocols would take effect, but many were eager to begin immediately. Thomas Wright's first action as Director of Service Culture was to gather his core team in the same conference room where the revelation had taken place. Sarah Martinez sat at his right hand, her previous role as a cautionary tale now transformed into a powerful testimony for change. Kevin Matthews, whose overnight transformation had demonstrated the possibility of rapid cultural shift, was also invited to join the leadership team. "Our first priority," Thomas began, "is to identify and support those staff members who already embody the true Skybridge standard." He looked at his tablet, where Alexandra had shared her detailed observations from the past 2 weeks. "We're not starting from scratch. There are pockets of excellence throughout our network. We just need to amplify them." In the first-class lounge, Victoria was already implementing changes. The invitation-only signs had been removed, replaced with welcoming messages in multiple languages. More significantly, she had gathered her team for an impromptu training session, using her own past behavior as an example of what needed to change. "I was wrong," she admitted to her staff, displaying a humility that surprised many who knew her. "We've been judging books by their covers, and in doing so, we've violated the very essence of premium service." She then shared a story Alexandra had told her privately about a time when she herself, as a young entrepreneur, had been denied proper service due to her appearance. Meanwhile, Alexandra was conducting a different kind of meeting in her newly reclaimed office. She had gathered the airline's marketing and communications teams to completely overhaul Skybridge's public image. The challenge was substantial: how to maintain the airline's premium positioning while explicitly rejecting the exclusivity that many associated with luxury travel. "Our new campaign needs to redefine luxury," Alexandra explained, sketching ideas on a whiteboard. "It's not about creating barriers, it's about removing them while maintaining excellence." She outlined a vision for advertisements that would feature diverse passengers receiving identical high-level service, deliberately challenging traditional luxury marketing tropes. Down in the terminal, the transformation was already visible. Sarah had organized a spontaneous workshop with check-in staff, sharing her personal journey from bias to enlightenment. "I used to think I was protecting our premium image," she confessed to the group. "Now I understand that discrimination was actually damaging it." The most remarkable changes were happening organically. During the afternoon rush, a group of first-class passengers witnessed something extraordinary. A young family, clearly new to premium travel, approached the lounge entrance nervously. Before any staff member could react, two regular first-class passengers, who had been present during Alexandra's undercover investigation, stepped forward to welcome them. "The lounge has an excellent children's area," one executive told the parents, while her colleague helped with their bags. The message was clear. The passengers themselves were becoming advocates for the new culture. Alexandra observed these developments from various vantage points throughout the day, no longer in disguise, but still maintaining a low profile. She watched as Thomas conducted impromptu training sessions, demonstrating through example how to handle difficult situations with grace and equality. One particularly powerful moment came when a wealthy passenger complained about being seated next to someone they deemed inappropriate for first class. Thomas's handling of the situation became an immediate teaching opportunity. "At Skybridge Airways," he explained calmly, "our commitment to premium service extends to protecting the dignity of all our passengers. I cannot and will not discriminate against any customer who has chosen to fly with us." The statement, delivered with professional courtesy but unmistakable firmness, drew subtle nods of approval from nearby staff and passengers alike. By evening, Janet had compiled the first data from their new feedback system. The results were encouraging. Even in these early hours, passengers were noticing the change in atmosphere. Comments highlighted the more welcoming environment, the consistency of service, and most importantly, the genuine nature of the interactions. Alexandra ended the day by gathering her core team for a final review. Thomas presented his initial implementation plan for the Skybridge Standard program, while Sarah shared insights from her frontline observations. The challenges ahead were significant, but the day's experiences had proven that change was possible. "We're not just changing policies," Alexandra concluded, looking around the room at her assembled leaders. "We're changing hearts and minds. It won't happen overnight, but today has shown us it can happen." She gestured to a wall of screens showing live feeds from various terminals. "Every interaction is an opportunity to reinforce our true values." As the meeting concluded, a message appeared on Alexandra's phone. Feedback from Robert Chen, the tech entrepreneur who had participated in the overnight test. "Today, I witnessed something rare in business," he wrote. "A company actually living its values rather than just promoting them. Count me in as a regular customer." The message confirmed what Alexandra had believed all along, that true luxury wasn't about exclusivity, but about consistently delivering excellence to everyone. As she prepared to leave for the day, she smiled at the sight of Thomas training a new group of staff members, Sarah sharing her story with another team, and Victoria completely rearranging the lounge to be more welcoming. The transformation was just beginning, but its foundation was already solid. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Skybridge Airways was finally becoming the airline Alexandra had always envisioned, where premium meant not just the service provided, but the dignity with which it was delivered. Part 10. The lasting impact. 6 months after Alexandra's undercover revelation, Skybridge Airways had undergone a remarkable transformation. The changes that began in Terminal 8 had rippled across the entire airline industry, setting new standards for premium service and challenging long-held assumptions about luxury travel. Thomas Wright, now Executive Vice President of Global Service Culture, stood before a packed auditorium at the International Aviation Conference in Singapore. His presentation, titled "Redefining Premium: The Skybridge Revolution," had drawn airline executives from around the world, all eager to understand how one company had managed to increase both customer satisfaction and profitability by eliminating discriminatory practices. "The math is simple," Thomas explained, gesturing to the data displayed behind him. When you remove artificial barriers to premium service, you don't diminish luxury, you enhance it. The numbers supported his assertion. Skybridge's customer satisfaction scores had risen by 47% across all cabin classes, while their premium cabin revenue had increased by 32%. Back in New York, Sarah Martinez was conducting one of her signature training sessions. What had started as informal workshops had evolved into a comprehensive program called Service Without Borders. Airline staff from competing carriers now regularly attended these sessions, leading to a gradual industry-wide shift in service culture. "I was that person," Sarah admitted to her audience, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "I thought I was maintaining standards by judging passengers based on appearance. Now I understand that true standards have nothing to do with how someone looks and everything to do with how we treat them." The transformation was most visible in the daily operations. Victoria, once the embodiment of exclusionary service, had been promoted to head of premium experience innovation. Her first initiative had been to redesign the first-class lounges, removing the subtle architectural barriers that had once made certain passengers feel unwelcome. "Every design element now serves a dual purpose," Victoria explained to a group of architectural students touring the renovated space. "We maintain the luxury aesthetic while ensuring accessibility and comfort for all our premium passengers." The new lounge layout had become a case study in inclusive design, featured in several international architecture journals. Kevin Matthews, whose overnight shift had marked the beginning of his personal transformation, now led Skybridge's Night Sky Initiative, a program ensuring consistent service standards around the clock. His team had eliminated the common practice of relaxing standards during off-peak hours, proving that excellence could be maintained 24/7. Alexandra watched these developments with quiet satisfaction, but she wasn't done yet. Today marked the launch of Skybridge's most ambitious project to date, the Global Service Exchange Program. The initiative would partner with airlines worldwide to share best practices in inclusive premium service. "The goal isn't just to improve our own airline," Alexandra explained to a group of industry leaders gathered in the same conference room where she'd revealed her identity 6 months ago. "It's to transform the entire concept of luxury air travel." The program had already attracted partners from 23 airlines across 6 continents. Even carriers known for their traditional approach to premium service were beginning to recognize the benefits of Skybridge's inclusive model. One of the most significant changes had come from an unexpected source. Regular premium passengers, initially skeptical of the new approach, had become its strongest advocates. Many reported feeling more valued when their status was acknowledged for their choice to fly first class rather than their appearance or background. Diana Chen, a frequent first-class passenger and CEO of a major tech company, summed it up during a customer feedback session. "Before, luxury felt exclusive. Now it feels exceptional. There's a difference, and it matters." The impact extended beyond customer service. Skybridge's recruitment patterns had shifted, focusing on candidates who demonstrated emotional intelligence and inclusive mindsets, rather than just technical skills or previous luxury service experience. The airline's training academy had been completely redesigned, with Thomas and Sarah's insights forming the core of the new curriculum. Industry publications had taken notice. Aviation Weekly's cover story, "The Skybridge Effect," detailed how one airline's cultural transformation was reshaping industry standards. The article highlighted specific changes, from the elimination of subjective dress codes to the introduction of blind service audits that focused purely on quality and consistency. Perhaps the most telling indicator of success came from an unexpected metric: Employee satisfaction scores had skyrocketed. Staff reported feeling more fulfilled in their roles when they could focus on genuine service excellence rather than arbitrary discrimination. "We're not just providing a service," Thomas often reminded his teams. "We're restoring dignity to luxury travel, one interaction at a time." As the sun set over JFK's Terminal 8, Alexandra stood in the same spot where she'd first witnessed the discrimination that sparked her undercover mission. The scene before her was markedly different now. A diverse group of premium passengers moved smoothly through the terminal, each receiving the same high level of service that had once been reserved for a select few. Near the first-class lounge entrance, she noticed a young family being warmly welcomed, similar to the one she'd seen turned away during her investigation. The parents' relieved smiles and the children's excitement reflected exactly what premium service should be about, creating exceptional experiences for everyone who chose to fly with Skybridge. Alexandra's phone buzzed with a message from Janet. The latest customer satisfaction surveys had just come in, showing another record high. But it wasn't the numbers that made Alexandra smile. It was the accompanying comment from a passenger. "For the first time in my years of luxury travel, I felt valued, not for who I appeared to be, but simply because I was a Skybridge passenger." The transformation was complete, but in many ways, it was just the beginning. Skybridge Airways had not just changed its own culture, it had sparked a revolution in how the aviation industry approached premium service. And somewhere in Terminal 8, Thomas Wright was probably already planning the next innovation in inclusive luxury travel. Part 11. Industry Revolution. 1 year after Alexandra's undercover journey, Skybridge Airways hosted the first international summit on inclusive luxury travel. The event, held in their newly constructed Training and Innovation Center adjacent to JFK's Terminal 8, brought together aviation leaders from across the globe. But the most significant attendees weren't airline executives. They were frontline staff members who had driven the cultural transformation. Thomas Wright opened the summit with a presentation that silenced the room. "A year ago," he began, "we thought we were fixing a customer service problem. What we actually did was expose an industry-wide bias that had gone unchallenged for decades." He gestured to a wall of screens showing real-time customer interaction data from airports around the world. The statistics were compelling. Airlines that had adopted Skybridge's inclusive service model showed a consistent pattern: higher customer loyalty, increased premium cabin bookings, and, most surprisingly, a significant reduction in service-related conflicts. The data challenged the long-held belief that exclusive service was necessary to maintain a luxury image. Sarah Martinez, now Global Director of Service Training, led a powerful session on transformation. Her program, From Bias to Bridge Building, had become mandatory training not just for Skybridge staff, but for several partner airlines. "The hardest part," she explained to the gathered audience, "isn't changing procedures, it's changing mindsets." Victoria's lounge redesign project had evolved into a complete rethinking of premium spaces. Working with renowned architects and behavioral psychologists, she had created environments that maintained luxury aesthetics while subtly promoting inclusivity. The new designs eliminated traditional status markers in favor of features that enhanced the travel experience for all premium passengers. "Look at this lighting system," Victoria explained, demonstrating how subtle environmental cues could replace overt status symbols. It creates an atmosphere of sophistication while ensuring every passenger feels equally welcome, regardless of their appearance or background. Kevin Matthews presented the results of his Night Sky initiative, which had revolutionized off-peak service standards. His team had discovered that maintaining consistent excellence during quieter hours actually reduced operational costs by preventing the accumulation of service issues that typically surfaced during peak periods. But the summit's most powerful moment came from an unexpected source. A group of premium passengers who had experienced both the old and new service models shared their perspectives. Among them was James Chen, the elderly passenger who had been discriminated against during Alexandra's investigation. "I've been flying first class for 40 years, James told the audience, his voice carrying decades of experience. "Under the old system, I had to prove I belonged there every time I flew. Now, for the first time, I'm treated with dignity simply because I chose to fly with Skybridge." Alexandra observed these presentations from the back of the room, taking pride in how far her company had come. But she wasn't content with just maintaining the changes. During the summit's keynote address, she announced Skybridge's next initiative, the Universal Premium Experience. The program would extend beyond air travel, partnering with hotels, restaurants, and luxury retailers to create a comprehensive approach to inclusive luxury service. The goal was to ensure that premium customers experienced consistent, respectful treatment across their entire journey. "Luxury isn't about exclusion," Alexandra explained. "It's about excellence. And excellence should be accessible to anyone who chooses to invest in a premium experience." Her announcement was met with immediate interest from several luxury brands who had observed Skybridge's success. The summit also addressed challenges that had emerged during the transformation. Some traditional luxury travelers had initially resisted the changes, concerned that broader accessibility would diminish their experience. Skybridge's response had been to enhance service quality even further, proving that inclusivity and excellence were not mutually exclusive. Thomas shared how they had handled such concerns. "We showed our premium passengers that their status came from their choice to fly first class, not from being part of an exclusive club that judges others." The approach had actually increased loyalty among high-net-worth customers who appreciated the more authentic service environment. The event concluded with the launch of the Global Aviation Equality Initiative, a partnership between 20 major airlines committed to eliminating discrimination in premium travel. Alexandra watched as airline representatives signed the pledge, remembering how it had all started with her decision to experience her own airline service firsthand. As delegates departed, many through Skybridge's Terminal 8, they witnessed the principles they'd discussed in action. The seamless flow of diverse premium passengers, the consistent excellence of service, and the notably positive atmosphere demonstrated that inclusive luxury wasn't just a theory, it was a practical, profitable reality. Later that evening, in a quiet moment in her office overlooking the terminal, Alexandra reflected on the journey. Her undercover experience had revealed problems she hadn't expected to find, but it had also shown her the potential for transformative change. The stack of partnership requests on her desk and the steady stream of industry awards were nice validation. But the real measure of success was visible through her window. Passengers of all backgrounds moving through the terminal with equal dignity and confidence. A knock at her door revealed Thomas, Sarah, and Victoria carrying a surprising piece of memorabilia, the coffee-stained sweatshirt she'd worn during her undercover operation. They'd had it framed with a simple inscription, "Sometimes you have to change your perspective to change the world." Undercover, Part 12. The future takes flight. 18 months after Alexandra's undercover journey, Skybridge Airways unveiled its most ambitious project yet, the Reynolds Institute for Service Excellence. Located in a gleaming new building adjacent to JFK's Terminal 8, the Institute represented the culmination of everything the airline had learned about transforming service culture. On opening day, Alexandra stood before a diverse audience of airline executives, service industry leaders, and frontline staff from around the world. The Institute's first class of students, service professionals from 5 continents, sat in the front rows, ready to begin their training in the new paradigm of inclusive luxury. "When I went undercover," Alexandra began, "I thought I was investigating a problem within my airline. What I discovered was an opportunity to reimagine the entire concept of premium service." She gestured to the state-of-the-art training facilities. Behind her, where simulation rooms could recreate any service scenario imaginable, Thomas Wright, now president of Global Operations, led tours through the Institute's innovative learning spaces. "Each room is designed to challenge assumptions about luxury service," he explained, demonstrating how virtual reality technology allowed trainees to experience service interactions from multiple perspectives. The Institute's curriculum, developed by Sarah Martinez and a team of behavioral psychologists, went far beyond traditional customer service training. "We're not just teaching people how to serve," Sarah explained to a group of curious executives. "We're teaching them how to see, to recognize and challenge their own biases while maintaining the highest standards of service excellence." Victoria's contribution to the Institute was particularly noteworthy. She had created an immersive experience called Walking in Their Shoes, where service providers spent time as passengers from various backgrounds, experiencing firsthand how subtle biases could impact the travel experience. "Until you felt the sting of discrimination personally," Victoria shared, "it's hard to fully understand its impact on our passengers." Her own transformation from enforcer of exclusivity to champion of inclusion had become a powerful case study in the Institute's curriculum. Kevin Matthews had developed a unique program focusing on consistent service delivery across different cultural contexts. His Global Service Language initiative taught staff how to maintain high standards while respecting and accommodating diverse cultural expectations. But the Institute's most innovative feature was its research division. Led by Dr. Emily Chen, a renowned expert in service psychology, the team studied how inclusive luxury practices affected both customers and service providers. Their findings challenged traditional industry assumptions about the relationship between exclusivity and perceived value. "What we're discovering, Dr. Chen explained during a presentation of their initial research, is that removing discriminatory barriers actually enhances the luxury experience for all passengers. When service is based on genuine excellence rather than artificial exclusivity, everyone benefits." The Institute's impact extended beyond the aviation industry. Luxury hotels, high-end retailers, and premium service providers from various sectors had begun sending staff for training. The principles of inclusive luxury that had transformed Skybridge were proving equally valuable across the service spectrum. During a break between sessions, Alexandra wandered through the Institute's Heritage Hall, where displays chronicled the evolution of luxury service. Her old disguise, the coffee-stained sweatshirt and worn sneakers, held a place of honor alongside photographs documenting the airline's transformation. A particularly moving exhibit featured video testimonials from passengers and staff whose lives had been changed by the new approach to service. Among them was James Chen, the elderly passenger whose discrimination had sparked Alexandra's initial concern. He had become a regular speaker at the Institute, sharing his experiences to help others understand the importance of dignity in service. The Institute's influence was already visible in industry metrics. Airlines that had adopted its training programs reported significant improvements in customer satisfaction and staff retention. More importantly, they saw a fundamental shift in how premium service was perceived and delivered. Thomas joined Alexandra as she observed a training session in progress. "Remember when we thought this was just about fixing a few discriminatory practices?" he asked with a smile. "Now we're changing how the whole world thinks about luxury service." The session they were watching featured a scenario based on real events from Alexandra's undercover experience. Trainees had to navigate complex situations while maintaining both service standards and human dignity. The solutions they proposed showed how far the industry had come in understanding true premium service. Later that afternoon, Alexandra participated in a panel discussion with industry leaders who had initially resisted the inclusive luxury model. Many now acknowledged that their fears about diminishing the premium experience had been unfounded. Instead, they found that removing artificial barriers had actually enhanced the value of their service offerings. "The numbers don't lie," shared one converted skeptic, a CEO of a major Asian airline. "Since implementing these principles, our premium cabin revenue has increased by 40%, while customer complaints have dropped by 60%. It turns out that treating everyone with dignity is good for business." As the day drew to a close, Alexandra gathered with her core team, Thomas, Sarah, Victoria, and Kevin, in the Institute's rooftop garden overlooking the airport. The sight of aircraft taking off and landing reminded them of their ongoing mission. "A year and a half ago," Alexandra reflected, "I put on a disguise to understand what was wrong with our airline. Today, we're teaching the world what's possible when we remove the disguises of prejudice and discrimination." The Institute's first graduating class would soon disperse across the globe, carrying with them the principles and practices that had transformed Skybridge Airways. But for Alexandra and her team, this was just the beginning. The next phase of their journey would take the concept of inclusive luxury to new heights, proving that excellence and equality could not only coexist, but thrive together. Part 13. Global Horizons. 2 years after Alexandra's undercover journey, Skybridge Airways' influence had spread far beyond American shores. The airline's revolutionary approach to inclusive luxury was being adapted and implemented across diverse cultural contexts, from the bustling terminals of Tokyo's Narita Airport to the ultra-modern halls of Dubai International. Alexandra found herself in Singapore's Changi Airport, observing how their partnership with Singapore Airlines had evolved. The adaptation of Skybridge's principles to Asian service culture had produced remarkable innovations she hadn't anticipated. Local staff had enhanced the inclusive luxury model with elements of traditional Asian hospitality, creating a unique synthesis that was both universal and culturally specific. We discovered that true inclusivity means understanding and respecting cultural differences while maintaining consistent service standards, explained Lin Wei Chen, Singapore Airlines' newly appointed Director of Cultural Integration. She had been one of the first graduates of the Reynolds Institute and had taken the inclusive luxury concept in fascinating new directions. In Changi's premium terminal, Alexandra watched as staff seamlessly blended Skybridge's principles with local customs. An elderly couple in simple clothing was treated with the same deep respect as visiting dignitaries, but with subtle cultural adaptations that made them feel particularly welcome. The staff's ability to read and respond to cultural cues while maintaining consistent service standards was impressive. Thomas Wright, who had accompanied Alexandra on this Asian tour, was gathering insights for the Reynolds Institute's expanded curriculum. "Each culture we work with adds new dimensions to our understanding of inclusive luxury," he noted, documenting how Singapore's staff handled complex multicultural interactions. The most striking example came during a busy morning rush. A group of premium passengers from various backgrounds, including a Saudi prince, a tech entrepreneur in casual wear, and a family of first-time luxury travelers, arrived simultaneously. The staff's handling of this diverse group demonstrated how far the inclusive luxury model had evolved. "Watch how they maintain equality while acknowledging cultural differences," Thomas pointed out. Each passenger received the same high level of service, but with subtle customizations that respected their individual cultural contexts without creating hierarchy or discrimination. Sarah Martinez, who was developing a new training program focused on cultural intelligence, found herself taking notes. "This is exactly what we mean by universal excellence," she observed. "The service standard remains consistent, but the delivery adapts to make each passenger feel personally valued." The success in Singapore had led to unexpected developments. Luxury hotels across Asia had begun sending their staff to study this new approach. The Ritz-Carlton Group had even partnered with Skybridge to develop specialized training programs, combining their legendary service standards with the inclusive luxury model. Victoria's lounge design concepts had evolved as well. Working with Asian architects, she had created spaces that harmoniously balanced luxury with accessibility across cultural contexts. The new lounge in Changi featured design elements that made passengers from any background feel welcome while maintaining an atmosphere of sophistication. The key was understanding that luxury doesn't have to look the same everywhere, Victoria explained during a tour of the facility, but the feeling of being valued and respected should be universal. The lounge's subtle blend of Eastern and Western design elements created an environment that transcended cultural boundaries. The impact was evident in the numbers. Premium bookings had increased across all passenger demographics, and customer satisfaction scores showed remarkable consistency across cultural backgrounds. More importantly, staff reported higher job satisfaction and reduced stress levels when working within this more inclusive framework. Kevin Matthews' Night Sky initiative had taken on new significance in the global context. His team had developed protocols for maintaining service consistency across different time zones and cultural norms regarding time. "Excellence doesn't sleep" became their motto, as they ensured the same high standards during midnight arrivals in Tokyo as morning departures in Dubai. Alexandra's next stop would be the Middle East, where another fascinating adaptation of the inclusive luxury model was taking shape. But before leaving Singapore, she witnessed a moment that captured everything her undercover journey had set in motion. A young staff member, noticing a passenger's discomfort with the premium lounge's grandeur, approached with genuine warmth. Instead of the condescension that might have once been common, she shared a personal story about her own first experience with luxury travel. This simple human connection transformed the passenger's entire experience. Later, in a meeting with Changi's senior management, Alexandra reflected on how far they'd come. "When we started this journey, we thought we were fixing a service problem," she said. "What we actually did was start a global conversation about human dignity in luxury services." The executives shared their own observations about how the inclusive luxury model had transformed their operation. Traditional luxury travelers, initially skeptical, had become strong advocates for the new approach. They reported feeling that their premium experience was enhanced, not diminished, by the more inclusive environment. As her Singapore visit drew to a close, Alexandra received news that would take Skybridge's mission in an unexpected direction. A consortium of luxury brands, from hotels to fashion houses, had approached the Reynolds Institute about creating an industry-wide standard for inclusive luxury service. "It seems we've started something bigger than we imagined," Thomas remarked as they boarded their flight to Dubai. Alexandra smiled, remembering the coffee-stained sweatshirt that had started it all. Sometimes the biggest changes begin with the smallest shifts in perspective. And Part 14, Desert Transformation. Dubai International Airport's Terminal 3 presented Alexandra with perhaps her most complex challenge yet. In a region where luxury was deeply ingrained in the cultural fabric and social hierarchies were clearly Defined, implementing Skybridge's inclusive luxury model required careful navigation of both cultural sensitivities and established practices. The partnership with Emirates Airlines had initially raised eyebrows in the industry. How could Skybridge's egalitarian approach mesh with the ultra-luxury expectations of Gulf carriers? The answer emerged through an unexpected collaboration between Thomas Wright and Fatima Al-Rashid, Emirates Chief of Premium Services. Luxury in our culture is about honoring guests, Fatima explained during a strategy session in Emirates headquarters. The challenge was helping our staff see that every premium passenger is equally deserving of that honor. Her insight had led to a unique synthesis of Middle Eastern hospitality traditions with Skybridge's inclusive approach. Alexandra observed the results from Emirates' first-class lounge, where the transformation was most visible. Traditional Middle Eastern hospitality elements remained: the ornate decor, the personal butler service, the premium Arabic coffee service. But the subtle hierarchies that had once determined service levels had disappeared. A particularly telling moment occurred when a young entrepreneur in casual clothing entered the lounge. Previously, such a passenger might have faced subtle questioning or reduced attention. Instead, the staff welcomed him with the same elaborate courtesy extended to sheikhs and diplomats. The young man, it turned out, was a successful tech startup founder who preferred comfortable attire when traveling. Sarah Martinez had spent weeks working with Emirates' training team to develop culturally appropriate ways to implement the inclusive service model. "We're not asking staff to abandon their cultural values," she explained to a group of trainers. "We're showing them how those values naturally align with treating all premium passengers with equal respect." The program's success became evident during a busy afternoon rush. A diverse group of premium passengers filled the lounge: Emirati, businessmen in traditional dress, Western executives, South Asian entrepreneurs, and African diplomats. The staff moved seamlessly between them, maintaining consistent service standards while respecting cultural preferences. Victoria's contribution to the Middle Eastern expansion had been particularly innovative. Working with local designers, she had created lounge spaces that maintained the region's signature opulence while subtly promoting inclusivity. Traditional Majlis-style seating areas were reimagined to encourage natural interaction between diverse passengers while respecting cultural norms about personal space and privacy. The key was understanding that luxury can be both grand and welcoming, Victoria noted as she guided Alexandra through the new design. "We kept the elements that make Middle Eastern luxury distinctive while removing the invisible barriers that made some passengers feel less welcome." Kevin Matthews faced unique challenges implementing his Night Sky initiative in a region where business hours and travel patterns differed significantly from Western norms. His team developed a new approach they called Desert Stars, a service protocol that maintained excellence through the region's distinctive peak periods, particularly during night flights and religious observances. The most significant breakthrough came through an unexpected channel. The region's royal families, traditionally the standard bearers for luxury service, began actively supporting the inclusive model. Prince Abdullah bin Hassan, a frequent flyer and business leader, became an outspoken advocate after experiencing the new approach. "True nobility," the prince declared during a regional aviation conference, "is demonstrated not by how we treat those of high status, but by how we treat everyone who crosses our path." His endorsement helped shift perspectives throughout the Gulf region's premium travel sector. Alexandra witnessed this cultural shift during an impromptu visit to the first-class check-in area. A family of first-time premium travelers, clearly nervous about the opulent surroundings, was immediately put at ease by staff who combined traditional Arabian hospitality with Skybridge's inclusive approach. The impact extended beyond the airports. Luxury hotels across Dubai and Abu Dhabi began sending their staff to study this new synthesis of Middle Eastern hospitality and inclusive luxury. The Burj Al Arab, renowned for its 7-star service, partnered with the Reynolds Institute to develop specialized training programs. Thomas had worked closely with local cultural experts to ensure the training materials resonated with regional values. We discovered that the principles of inclusive luxury actually align perfectly with traditional Middle Eastern concepts of hospitality and honor, he explained during a staff development session. It's not about changing the culture, it's about expanding who receives these honors. The results exceeded expectations. Premium bookings increased across all passenger demographics, while customer satisfaction scores showed unprecedented consistency. More surprisingly, the Gulf region's traditionally luxury-focused passengers reported enhanced experiences under the new model. As evening approached, Alexandra joined Fatima for traditional Arabic coffee in the observation lounge. Below them, aircraft from dozens of carriers moved across the desert tarmac, their lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. When you first proposed this partnership, Fatima reflected, many thought it wouldn't work in our culture. But you've helped us remember something our ancestors knew, that true hospitality knows no boundaries. The success in Dubai had opened new possibilities. Luxury brands across the Middle East, from high-end retailers to premium services, were beginning to adopt similar principles. The inclusive luxury model had proven its ability to adapt to even the most traditionally hierarchical service cultures while maintaining both excellence and cultural authenticity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the program expanded to other Gulf carriers, but Alexandra was confident in the foundation they had built. In a region where luxury had long been synonymous with exclusivity, Skybridge had helped create something revolutionary, a service model that honored both cultural traditions and human dignity. The Drews Part 15, Beyond the Skies. 3 years after Alexandra's undercover journey, the principles that transformed Skybridge Airways had sparked a revolution across the entire luxury service industry. The Reynolds Institute had become a global center for reimagining premium experiences, attracting leaders from sectors far beyond aviation. Alexandra found herself addressing an unprecedented gathering at New York's Plaza Hotel. The audience included CEOs from luxury hotel chains, fashion houses, fine dining establishments, and high-end retailers, all eager to understand how Skybridge's inclusive luxury model could transform their industries. What began as an airline's response to discrimination has evolved into something much more profound, Alexandra explained to the assembled leaders. We've discovered that true luxury isn't about creating barriers. It's about elevating experiences for everyone who chooses premium service. The evidence supporting her words was compelling. Thomas Wright presented case studies from various industries that had adopted the model. The Ritz-Carlton Hotel Group reported a 40% increase in customer loyalty after implementing inclusive luxury principles. Michelin-starred restaurants saw higher repeat business across diverse customer demographics. Luxury retailers experienced significant growth in premium sales while reducing customer complaints. Sarah Martinez had developed specialized training programs for different service sectors. Each industry has its own challenges, she explained during a breakout session, but the core principle remains the same: maintaining excellence while eliminating artificial barriers to premium experiences. A particularly successful adaptation had emerged in the high-end retail sector. Victoria's design principles, originally created for airport lounges, had been reimagined for luxury boutiques. Traditional, intimidating facades gave way to welcoming spaces that maintained sophistication while encouraging broader engagement. We're not diminishing exclusivity, Victoria explained to a group of retail executives. We're redefining it based on choice rather than appearance or background. Her redesigned spaces had proved so successful that several major luxury brands were completely revamping their global store concepts. Kevin Matthews' Night Sky initiative had evolved into a comprehensive approach to consistent service delivery across time zones and contexts. Global luxury brands adopted his protocols to ensure that a customer in Tokyo received the same level of service at midnight as one in Paris at noon. The transformation was perhaps most visible in the fine dining sector. Michelin-starred chef Marcus Laurent, initially skeptical of the inclusive approach, had become one of its strongest advocates after implementing the principles at his restaurants. "I used to think luxury dining was about exclusivity," Marcus shared during a panel discussion. "Now I understand it's about creating extraordinary experiences for everyone who values fine cuisine." His restaurants had maintained their prestigious ratings while becoming more accessible to diverse clientele. The impact extended to unexpected areas. Luxury car dealerships reported increased sales after adopting inclusive service practices. High-end spas found new markets without losing their premium positioning. Even exclusive clubs and member-only services discovered that removing discriminatory barriers enhanced rather than diminished their appeal. Alexandra observed these developments with particular interest during a visit to Bergdorf Goodman, where the inclusive luxury model had transformed the shopping experience. Sales associates who once profiled customers based on appearance now focused on providing consistent excellence to everyone who entered the store. A revealing moment occurred when a young woman in casual clothes entered the designer section. Instead of the subtle dismissal that might have occurred in the past, she received attentive service that matched her interest in luxury fashion. The woman, it turned out, was a successful cryptocurrency entrepreneur, making her first major luxury purchase. The Reynolds Institute had expanded to meet growing demand, opening specialized training centers in Paris, Tokyo, and Dubai. Each location adapted the core principles to local luxury markets while maintaining the fundamental commitment to inclusive excellence. Thomas's team had developed industry-specific certification programs that became highly sought after in the luxury sector. The Skybridge Standard, as it became known, was now considered a mark of excellence in premium service delivery. Sarah's training programs evolved to address unique challenges in different luxury contexts. Whether it's a five-star hotel, a premium boutique, or a fine dining restaurant, she explained, the key is helping staff understand that true luxury service is about elevating experiences, not judging who deserves them. The transformation had broader societal impacts. Traditional luxury consumers reported more satisfying experiences in the more inclusive environment. New customers who might have felt intimidated by luxury services now felt welcomed while still experiencing the highest standards of service. Alexandra reflected on this evolution during a quiet moment in her office, now located in the expanded Reynolds Institute building. On her wall hung photographs documenting the journey, from her undercover days in a coffee-stained sweatshirt to recent images of luxury brands implementing the inclusive model globally. A notification on her phone announced the latest statistics. Customer satisfaction scores across participating luxury brands had reached record highs. More significantly, employee satisfaction had increased dramatically as staff found greater fulfillment in delivering genuine service excellence rather than enforcing artificial exclusivity. The next phase of development was already taking shape. Educational institutions had begun incorporating inclusive luxury principles into their hospitality and business programs. Government agencies were studying the model for applications in public service delivery. The transformation that began with one airline's service culture was reshaping understanding of premium experiences across society. "We didn't just change how luxury service is delivered," Alexandra told a reporter from Forbes. "We changed how people think about the relationship between excellence and inclusivity." The article, titled "The Skybridge Effect: How One Airline's Undercover Boss Revolutionary Luxury Service Would Become Required Reading in Business Schools Worldwide," is a Part 16, Academic Evolution. 4 years after Alexandra's undercover journey, the impact of Skybridge's transformation had reached the halls of academia. Harvard Business School's amphitheater was packed as Alexandra delivered a guest lecture. That would become a pivotal moment in business education. "The Skybridge case study isn't just about airline service," she explained to the assembled students and faculty. "It's about challenging fundamental assumptions about how we define and deliver excellence in any field." The case had become required, reading at top business schools worldwide, sparking debates about the relationship between exclusivity and quality. Professor James Morrison, head of Harvard's Service Management program, had developed an entire course around the inclusive luxury model. "What makes this particularly fascinating," he shared during the post-lecture discussion, "is how it challenges traditional theories about premium service economics. The data shows that removing artificial barriers actually increases both value and profitability." The academic interest had led to groundbreaking research. The Reynolds Institute had partnered with leading universities to study the psychological and social impacts of inclusive excellence. Dr. Emily Chen, now heading the Institute's research division, presented surprising findings about how removing discriminatory practices affected both service providers and recipients. "We're seeing a fundamental shift in how people perceive luxury experiences," Dr. Chen explained during a research symposium. "When artificial barriers are removed, both traditional luxury consumers and new customers report higher satisfaction levels. It's challenging everything we thought we knew about exclusivity and perceived value." Thomas Wright had been instrumental in developing new academic frameworks for teaching inclusive service principles. His work with business schools led to the creation of specialized MBA tracks focusing on transformative service management. "We're not just training future managers," he explained to a group of educators. "We're developing leaders who understand that excellence and inclusivity are complementary, not contradictory." Sarah Martinez's training methodologies had been adapted for academic use, becoming part of curriculum development at hospitality schools worldwide. Her approach to recognizing and overcoming service biases was now being taught to the next generation of industry leaders before they entered the workforce. "Prevention is more effective than correction," Sarah noted during a teaching workshop at Cornell's Hotel School. "By embedding these principles in education, we're shaping how future leaders think about service excellence from the start." Victoria's design principles had sparked new research in environmental psychology and architectural theory. Her work on creating spaces that balanced luxury with accessibility had become a case study in design schools, influencing how future architects approached premium environments. A breakthrough moment came during an international education conference in London. Alexandra watched as educators from diverse fields discovered applications for the inclusive excellence model in their own disciplines. Medical schools discussed applying the principles to patient care. Law schools explored implications for client services. Even public policy programs saw potential applications in government service delivery. The impact on students was particularly noteworthy. Many reported that studying the Skybridge transformation had changed their career aspirations. "I used to think luxury service was about maintaining exclusivity," shared Maria Wong, a final-year Harvard MBA student. "Now I understand it's about elevating experiences while maintaining human dignity." Kevin Matthews' concepts had found unexpected applications in operations management courses. His Night Sky initiative had evolved into a comprehensive framework for maintaining service consistency across various contexts, becoming a standard part of operations management curriculum. The academic interest led to the establishment of the annual Inclusive Excellence Summit, bringing together scholars, industry leaders, and policymakers. The first summit, held at Oxford University, demonstrated how far the concepts had evolved beyond their aviation origins. Alexandra participated in a fascinating panel discussion with professors from different disciplines. A behavioral economist shared research on how inclusive luxury practices affected consumer psychology. A sociologist presented findings on the broader social impacts of removing service discrimination. An ethics professor explored the moral implications of traditional luxury service models. The summit also revealed how the principles were being adapted for public sector applications. Government agencies had begun implementing modified versions of the inclusive excellence model in citizen services. Healthcare institutions were exploring applications in patient care. Even educational institutions were adopting the principles. In student services, perhaps the most significant development was the emergence of new research fields. Universities had established centers dedicated to studying inclusive excellence in various contexts. Doctoral candidates were producing groundbreaking research on the psychological, social, and economic impacts of removing service barriers. During a quiet moment in Oxford's historic courtyards, Alexandra reflected on how far the transformation had spread. What began as an undercover investigation of airline service discrimination had evolved into a movement reshaping how society thought about excellence and accessibility. The academic world's embrace of these principles had added rigorous theoretical frameworks to support what Skybridge had discovered through practice. Research data now backed up what Alexandra had intuited during her undercover days, that true excellence was enhanced, not diminished, by removing artificial barriers. As evening fell over Oxford's spires, Alexandra reviewed the draft of a new book being published by Harvard Business Press, titled The Inclusive Excellence Revolution: How One Airline Changed Service Theory. It would become a foundational text. In business education, tomorrow would bring new challenges as the principles continued to spread into unexpected areas. But tonight, watching students debate these ideas in one of the world's oldest universities, Alexandra knew that the transformation had taken root in the next generation of leaders. The coffee-stained sweatshirt that had started it all now belonged in a museum, but its legacy would live on in countless classrooms and beyond. Part 17. Public Transformation. 5 years after Alexandra's undercover journey, the principles that transformed Skybridge Airways had found unexpected applications. In public services, the United Nations headquarters in New York hosted a groundbreaking conference where Alexandra witnessed how her airline's transformation had sparked a revolution in public sector service delivery. When we reimagined luxury service, we never imagined it would influence how governments interact with citizens, Alexandra remarked to an audience of public sector leaders from around the world. The gathering included ministers, mayors, and administrators eager to learn how inclusive excellence principles could improve public services. The most dramatic example came from Singapore, where the government had implemented a modified version of the Skybridge model across its citizen service centers. Thomas Wright had spent months working with their public service academy to adapt the principles for government use. The challenge was translating premium service concepts into public sector realities, Thomas explained during a presentation. We discovered that the core principles, dignity, respect, and consistent excellence, were actually more relevant in government services than anywhere else. Sarah Martinez had developed specialized training programs for public sector staff, focusing on eliminating unconscious bias in government service delivery. Her methods had proven particularly effective in healthcare settings, where traditional service hierarchies often affected patient care. A patient in a public hospital deserves the same level of respect as one in a private clinic, Sarah emphasized during a workshop for healthcare administrators. Excellence in service isn't about the cost of care, it's about the dignity of the interaction. Victoria's design principles had found surprising applications in public spaces. Working with urban planners, she had helped create government service centers that maintained efficiency while promoting dignity and respect. The new designs eliminated the often intimidating atmosphere of traditional government offices without compromising security or functionality. The physical environment sets expectations for both staff and citizens, Victoria explained as she guided a tour through a redesigned social services center in Manhattan. When we design spaces that respect human dignity, people naturally respond with more positive behavior. Kevin Matthews' consistency protocols had been adapted for 24/7 government services, ensuring that citizens received the same quality of service at any hour. His Public Stars initiative had transformed emergency services and around-the-clock government operations. The impact was particularly visible in New York City's public services, where Mayor Rodriguez had implemented a comprehensive adoption of inclusive excellence principles. The transformation began with the DMV, traditionally known for its challenging service environment, and spread to other departments. Alexandra visited the newly redesigned DMV office, where the changes were striking. Gone were the long, intimidating queues and stern-faced staff. Instead, citizens encountered an environment that respected their time and dignity while maintaining efficient operations. "We used to think government services couldn't match private sector quality," shared Maria Thompson, the DMV's director. "Now we're proving that public services can deliver excellence while serving everyone." Customer satisfaction scores had skyrocketed, while staff morale showed similar improvements. The healthcare sector had embraced the principles with particularly powerful results. Public hospitals implementing the inclusive excellence model reported improved patient outcomes alongside higher satisfaction scores. Dr. James Chen, Chief of Medicine at a major public hospital, shared compelling data during the conference. "When we treated every patient with the same level of respect we'd give a VIP, we saw measurable improvements in compliance with treatment plans and recovery rates," Dr. Chen reported. "It turns out dignity is actually medicine." Education systems had also adopted the approach. Public schools implementing inclusive excellence principles saw improvements in student engagement and academic performance. The model had proven especially effective in diverse communities, where traditional education systems often struggled with equity issues. Law enforcement agencies discovered that applying inclusive excellence principles improved community relations while maintaining effectiveness. Police departments reported better cooperation from citizens and reduced confrontations when officers applied the model's emphasis on dignity and respect. Alexandra participated in a fascinating panel discussion with public sector leaders who had implemented the principles. A prison warden shared how adopting inclusive excellence practices had reduced violence and improved rehabilitation outcomes. A public transportation director described how the approach had transformed customer service on city buses and trains. The United Nations itself had begun implementing the principles in its humanitarian operations. Relief workers trained in inclusive excellence reported more effective aid delivery and better relationships with affected communities. During a break in the conference, Alexandra walked through the UN's iconic building, reflecting on how far the transformation had spread. The principles that began with airline service had evolved into a framework for improving human interactions across society. The most compelling evidence came from citizen feedback. People reported feeling more valued and respected in their government. Interactions, leading to improved compliance and cooperation. Staff morale had improved as well, with public sector workers finding greater satisfaction in their roles. As evening approached, Alexandra joined a small group of leaders planning the next phase of public sector transformation. The discussion focused on expanding the model to more challenging areas: tax collection, regulatory enforcement, and social services. What we're really doing, Alexandra observed, is proving that excellence in service isn't about exclusivity or cost. It's about recognizing and respecting human dignity in every interaction. The notion that had transformed luxury air travel was now reshaping how governments served their citizens. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the principles spread to more public services. But tonight, watching civil servants discuss how to better serve their communities, Alexandra knew that the transformation had evolved far beyond its origins in airline service. The coffee-stained sweatshirt that sparked the revolution now symbolized something greater, a fundamental shift in how society approached service at every level. Part 18. Global Standards. 6 years after Alexandra's undercover journey, the World Economic Forum in Davos dedicated an entire track to what had become known as the Skybridge Standard. Leaders from governments, corporations, and non-profit organizations gathered to discuss how inclusive excellence had evolved into a global benchmark for service delivery across all sectors. Alexandra found herself addressing the forum's main hall, sharing the stage with international leaders who had implemented the principles in their own countries. The United Nations had recently adopted the Skybridge Standard as part of its Sustainable Development Goals, recognizing that dignity in service delivery was crucial to social progress. What began as a response to airline service discrimination has become a framework for human interaction, Alexandra explained to the assembled leaders. We're seeing how these principles transcend cultural boundaries while respecting local traditions. Thomas Wright presented compelling data from a global study of organizations that had adopted the standard. The results showed consistent improvements in service quality, customer satisfaction, and employee engagement across different cultures and contexts. The most fascinating aspect, Thomas noted, is how different cultures interpret and implement these principles while maintaining their core essence. He shared examples from Japan, where the model had merged with traditional omotenashi hospitality concepts, and Brazil, where it had enhanced the country's naturally warm service culture. Sarah Martinez had developed an international certification program that was becoming the global benchmark for service excellence. Organizations from hotels in Switzerland to hospitals in South Africa were seeking certification, recognizing its value in today's interconnected world. The certification isn't just about meeting standards, Sarah explained during a breakout session. It's about creating a universal language of respect and dignity in service delivery. Her program had been translated into 20 languages, each version carefully adapted to local cultural contexts. Victoria's design principles had evolved into an international building standard. Architects and designers worldwide were incorporating her concepts into everything from airport terminals to government buildings. The International Organization for Standardization, ISO, was in the process of adopting her guidelines as official standards. We're creating spaces that speak a universal language of welcome while honoring local architectural traditions, Victoria shared during an architecture forum. Her latest project, a massive transportation hub in Mumbai, demonstrated how global Standards could enhance rather than diminish local character. Kevin Matthews' consistency protocols had become particularly valuable in international organizations. His framework for maintaining service quality across time zones and cultures had been adopted by multinational corporations and global agencies. The real breakthrough came during a session on international development. The World Bank presented data showing how implementing inclusive excellence principles in development projects significantly improved outcomes. Communities were more likely to engage with and maintain development initiatives when treated with consistent respect and dignity. Alexandra participated in a revealing panel discussion with leaders from diverse sectors. A tech CEO described how the principles had transformed customer support across global markets. A healthcare administrator shared how they had improved international patient care. A diplomat explained how the approach had enhanced international relations. The most powerful moment came when a refugee camp administrator shared how implementing the principles had transformed life in the camps. When we began treating refugees with the same respect as luxury hotel guests, she explained, we saw dramatic improvements in camp management and resident cooperation. The forum also addressed emerging challenges. As artificial intelligence and automation became more prevalent in service delivery, organizations were working to embed inclusive excellence principles into their digital systems. Alexandra watched a demonstration of AI customer service software, programmed to maintain the same standards of respect and dignity that human staff had learned. During an evening reception, Alexandra met with representatives from the International Standards Committee. They were developing a comprehensive framework for implementing inclusive excellence across all industries and sectors. The Global Excellence Index would provide a universal metric for measuring service quality and human dignity in organizational interactions. We're seeing a fundamental shift in how organizations think about service, noted Dr. Maria Gonzalez, head of the Standards Committee. It's no longer about different standards for different levels of service. It's about maintaining consistent excellence for everyone. The impact extended to international commerce. Companies implementing the Skybridge standard reported improved cross-cultural business relationships and increased success in international markets. The principles had become a common language for business interaction across borders. Alexandra found particular satisfaction in how the standard was influencing education internationally. Business schools from Beijing to Buenos Aires had incorporated the principles into their core curriculum. The next generation of global leaders was learning to see service excellence and human dignity as inseparable concepts. As the forum drew to a close, Alexandra joined a final session on future developments. The discussion focused on emerging applications, how space tourism companies were adopting the principles, how smart cities were incorporating them into their design, and how virtual reality environments were being built around them. We're not just creating a standard for service, Alexandra observed. We're establishing a new paradigm for human interaction in the modern world. The coffee-stained sweatshirt that had started it all was now part of a permanent exhibition at the Smithsonian, but its influence continued to grow in ways she had never imagined. The next phase would bring new challenges as technology and social changes created new contexts for service delivery. But the core principles, dignity, respect, and consistent excellence, had proven their universal value. What began as one airline's transformation had become a global standard for human interaction in the 21st century. Part 19. Digital Evolution. 7 years after Alexandra's undercover journey, the principles that transformed Skybridge Airways found themselves at the intersection of technology and human interaction. The annual Tech Innovation Summit in Silicon Valley had dedicated its main program to exploring how artificial intelligence and digital systems could maintain the human dignity central to the Skybridge standard. Alexandra stood in a state-of-the-art demonstration room at Google's headquarters, watching as engineers showcased an AI system designed to embody inclusive excellence principles. The system, trained on millions of service interactions, could detect and respond to subtle cues in human communication while maintaining consistent respect across all user demographics. The challenge wasn't just teaching AI to be polite, explained Dr. Sarah Chen, Google's head of AI ethics. It was programming systems to understand and uphold human dignity in every interaction. The project had brought together technologists, psychologists, and service experts from the Reynolds Institute to create something unprecedented. Thomas Wright had been instrumental in developing the emotional intelligence frameworks that guided these new systems. Digital interactions shouldn't mean sacrificing the human elements that make service meaningful, he demonstrated as the AI system handled a complex customer scenario with remarkable sensitivity. Sarah Martinez's training principles had been transformed into advanced machine learning algorithms. Her insights into human behavior and bias recognition helped create AI systems that could identify and correct discriminatory patterns in automated service delivery. "We're not replacing human service providers," Sarah emphasized during a panel discussion. "We're creating digital tools that enhance their ability to deliver consistent excellence." The system she helped develop served as both service providers and training tools, helping human staff maintain higher standards of interaction. Victoria's design principles had evolved into virtual reality environments. Working with tech companies, she had created digital spaces that maintained the same welcoming atmosphere as her physical designs. Virtual service centers and meeting spaces incorporated her concepts for inclusive luxury, making digital interactions feel more human and dignified. "The principles of respectful design work in any medium," Victoria explained as she guided a tour through a virtual premium lounge. The space demonstrated how digital environments could maintain sophistication while remaining welcoming to all users. Kevin Matthews' consistency protocols had found new relevance in the age of 24/7 digital service. His framework helped ensure that automated systems maintained the same high standards of interaction regardless of time zone or user location. The most dramatic demonstration came from Microsoft's new customer service platform. The system combined advanced AI with the Skybridge standard to create what they called digital empathy, automated interactions that genuinely respected and responded to human dignity. Alexandra participated in a fascinating experiment where she revisited her original Undercover scenario in a virtual environment. The AI system demonstrated how it would handle the same situations that had originally revealed discrimination in airline service, showing remarkable ability to maintain consistent respect regardless of user profiles. Tech startups had embraced the principles in unexpected ways. A young company called Dignity Tech had created an AI ethics framework based on the Skybridge standard, helping organizations ensure their automated systems maintained human dignity in all interactions. "We're seeing a fundamental shift in how technology approaches service," noted Mark Zhang, Dignity Tech's founder. "Instead of just focusing on efficiency, we're creating systems that prioritize human dignity alongside operational excellence." The implications extended beyond customer service. Educational technology companies were incorporating the principles into online learning platforms, ensuring that digital education maintained the same standards of respect and inclusion as the best physical classrooms. Healthcare technology saw particularly powerful applications. Telemedicine platforms adopted the Skybridge standard to ensure that virtual medical consultations maintained the same level of dignity as in-person care. AI diagnostic systems were programmed to communicate with patients in ways that respected their humanity while delivering accurate medical information. During a break in the summit, Alexandra toured a prototype smart city testing facility. The urban environment demonstrated how inclusive excellence principles could be embedded in the very infrastructure of future cities, from automated transit systems to public service kiosks. The most promising developments came from young technologists who had grown up with these principles. A group of MIT students presented a project called Digital Dignity, an open-source framework for ensuring that emerging technologies maintained human respect in all interactions. "We're not just coding functions," explained Lisa Chen, the project's lead developer. "We're programming values into the foundation of future technology." Her team had created tools that help developers incorporate inclusive excellence principles into any digital application. Alexandra found particular satisfaction in how the principles were influencing social media development. New platforms were being designed with built-in features to promote respectful interaction and reduce discriminatory behavior using algorithms based on the Skybridge standard. As the summit concluded, Alexandra joined a forward-looking session on the future of human-technology interaction. The discussion explored emerging possibilities, how quantum computing might enhance understanding of human dignity, how brain-computer interfaces could maintain respect in direct neural communication, and how space colonization efforts could benefit from these principles. "The technology will continue to evolve," Alexandra observed, "but the core principle remains constant, maintaining human dignity in every interaction, whether digital or physical." The coffee-stained sweatshirt that had sparked the revolution now shared museum space with the first AI systems programmed to uphold its principles. The next phase would bring new challenges as technology continued to reshape human interaction. But the foundation had been laid for a future where digital systems enhanced rather than diminished human dignity. What began as an airline service, transformation, had become a guiding principle for technological development in the digital age. Part 20. The Legacy. 10 years after Alexandra Reynolds first donned that coffee-stained sweatshirt, she stood in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. The exhibition, Transforming Service, the Skybridge Revolution, had drawn record crowds, but today the museum was closed to the public. Alexandra walked through the carefully curated displays with a small group of special guests, the key figures, who had helped turn one airline's transformation into a global movement. Thomas Wright, now serving as the United Nations Global Ambassador for Service Excellence, paused before a familiar display. Behind the glass stood a mannequin wearing the worn sneakers and university sweatshirt that had started it all. "It's almost hard to believe," he mused, "that such a simple disguise could spark such profound change." The exhibition traced the journey from airline service reform to global standard. Interactive displays showed how the principles had spread from aviation to luxury retail, then to public services, and finally to technological innovation. But the most powerful exhibits were the personal stories, video testimonials from people whose lives had been touched by the transformation. Sarah Martinez, recently appointed as the first Secretary of Service Quality in the presidential cabinet, led a group of young service professionals through the museum's Innovation Lab. Here, visitors could experience simulations of both discriminatory and inclusive service scenarios, understanding through direct experience why the transformation had been so necessary. The most important lesson, Sarah explained to her attentive audience, isn't just about how we serve others. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity in every human interaction. The lab had become a mandatory stop for service industry, leaders from around the world, helping them understand the emotional impact of service discrimination. Victoria's contribution to the exhibition was particularly striking. A full-scale recreation of her first redesigned airport lounge stood alongside, models of how her principles had influenced architecture worldwide. The space demonstrated how physical environments could promote dignity while maintaining excellence, a concept now taught in architecture schools globally. Kevin Matthews, whose Night Sky initiative had evolved into an international standard for service consistency, worked with museum curators to ensure the exhibition captured the round-the-clock nature of the transformation. The museum had created a unique 24-hour service journey experience, allowing visitors to understand how consistent excellence could be maintained across time and context. But it was the newest addition to the exhibition that truly captured the scope of the transformation. A holographic display showed real-time data from organizations worldwide that had adopted the Skybridge standard. Numbers flickered across the globe, showing improvements in customer satisfaction, employee engagement, and social impact. Alexandra gathered her companions in the museum's central rotunda for a special announcement. 10 years ago, we set out to fix discrimination in airline service, she began. Today, we're launching something that will ensure these principles guide the next generation. She revealed plans for the Global Dignity Institute, a new organization that would work alongside the Reynolds Institute to promote inclusive excellence worldwide. The institute would focus on emerging challenges, maintaining human dignity in artificial intelligence, ensuring respect in virtual reality interactions, and adapting service principles for space tourism. But our most important initiative, Alexandra continued, is the Young Leaders Program. The program would identify and support young people committed to promoting dignity in service across all sectors. The first class of scholars, selected from 100 countries, would begin their fellowship next month. The announcement was interrupted by an unexpected visitor, James Chen, the elderly passenger whose discrimination had caught Alexandra's attention during her undercover days. Now in his 90s, he had become a powerful advocate for service dignity in his own right, speaking at conferences and advising organizations on inclusive excellence. 10 years ago, I was judged by my appearance in an airline lounge, James shared with the gathered audience. Today, I help ensure that no one faces such discrimination in any service interaction. His foundation had funded research into service equality and provided scholarships for underprivileged students entering the service industry. The exhibition's final gallery, titled Future Horizons, showcased emerging applications of the Skybridge standard. Virtual reality demonstrations showed how the principles were being applied in space tourism training, quantum computing interfaces, and artificial intelligence development. Alexandra led the group to a special display that hadn't yet been revealed to the public. It showed the results of a decade-long study tracking the impact of inclusive excellence across society. The data revealed something remarkable. In organizations that had fully embraced the principles, traditional barriers of class, culture, and status had begun to dissolve. We didn't just change how service is delivered, Alexandra explained. We helped change how people see and treat each other. The study showed improved social mobility, reduced discrimination, and increased understanding across social boundaries in communities where the principles had been widely adopted. As evening approached, Alexandra gathered with her original team. In the museum's private dining room, Thomas, Sarah, Victoria, and Kevin, each now a leader in their own right, shared memories of the transformation's early days. They were joined by newer allies, tech innovators, public service leaders, and young activists carrying the mission forward. The coffee-stained sweatshirt behind that glass, Alexandra concluded, represents more than just an undercover investigation. It represents the moment we realized that true excellence isn't about excluding people. It's about recognizing the dignity in every human being. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the principles continued to evolve and adapt. But tonight, surrounded by the evidence of how far they'd come, Alexandra and her team celebrated not just what they had achieved, but what they had started. A fundamental shift in how society approached human interaction at every level. The future would bring new technologies, new challenges, and new opportunities. But the core principle that had transformed an airline, then an industry, and finally a society, would remain constant. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and excellence, not because of who they appear to be, but simply because they are human. Part 21, Full Circle. 15 years after her undercover journey, Alexandra Reynolds found herself back at Denver International Airport's Terminal A, where it had all begun. This time, she wasn't wearing a disguise. She was here to witness something remarkable. The terminal had been transformed into a living laboratory for the next generation of service innovation. A group of young service professionals from the Global Dignity Institute's fellowship program were presenting their vision for the future of inclusive excellence. Among them was Emma Martinez, Sarah's daughter, who had grown up watching the transformation unfold and now led her own initiatives in service innovation. "My mother taught me that service excellence isn't just about procedures. It's about seeing the humanity in every person," Emma explained, as she demonstrated a new AI-powered system that could detect and prevent unconscious bias in service delivery. Her project combined the original principles with emerging technology in ways Alexandra hadn't imagined possible. The terminal itself had become a model for inclusive design worldwide. Victoria's principles had been enhanced by a new generation of architects who understood that physical spaces could either promote or hinder human dignity. Interactive elements responded to visitors' needs without requiring them to ask for assistance, while subtle design features ensured everyone felt equally welcomed. Thomas Wright watched with pride as his protégé presented their own innovations. His mentorship program had created a network of service leaders across the globe, each adapting the principles to their own cultural contexts, while maintaining the core focus on human dignity. "The most rewarding part," Thomas shared with Alexandra, "is seeing how they've taken our foundation and built something even more remarkable." His students had expanded the concept of service excellence into areas neither of them had considered possible, from deep space missions to virtual reality communities. Sarah Martinez, who had recently completed her term as Secretary of Service Quality, was working with a new initiative that brought inclusive excellence principles to developing nations. Her program had shown that implementing these principles could accelerate economic development while promoting social equality. When people feel valued in their interactions with institutions, they become more engaged citizens, Sarah explained to a group of international development experts. Her data showed how countries adopting the Skybridge standard had seen improvements in everything from public health to civic participation. Kevin Matthews had evolved his consistency protocols into a comprehensive framework for maintaining human dignity in automated systems. His work with artificial intelligence companies ensured that as service became increasingly automated, the human element wouldn't be lost. The day's most touching moment came when a young passenger approached Alexandra. The teenager explained that she had just finished reading about the Skybridge transformation in her social studies class. "Your story taught us that one person who refuses to accept discrimination can change the world," she said, her eyes bright with purpose. Alexandra's conversation with the young student sparked an idea. Working with education experts, she launched a new initiative called Future Dignity Leaders, a program that would help young people identify and address service discrimination in their own communities. "We're not just passing on principles," Alexandra explained during the program's announcement. "We're empowering the next generation to take these ideas further than we ever could." The program would provide resources, mentorship, and support for youth-led projects promoting service dignity. The impact of the transformation had extended far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Research showed that communities with high adoption rates of inclusive excellence principles experienced lower rates of social conflict, improved economic mobility, and stronger civic engagement. James Chen, now approaching his 100th birthday, had established a foundation dedicated to promoting dignity in elder care services. His work had transformed how society approached aging, ensuring that older adults received the same level of respect and excellence in their care as premium airline passengers. "When I was discriminated against in that airport lounge," James reflected, "I never imagined it would lead to improving life for millions of seniors worldwide." His foundation had partnered with healthcare providers globally to implement dignity-based care protocols. As evening approached, Alexandra gathered with her expanded team in the same spot where she had first witnessed discrimination 15 years ago. The terminal around them hummed with activity, but now each interaction reflected the principles they had worked so hard to establish. Emma Martinez unveiled her latest project, a virtual reality experience that would allow people to understand the emotional impact of service discrimination firsthand. "Understanding leads to change," she explained. "When people experience how discrimination feels, they become advocates for dignity." The next phase of their work would focus on emerging challenges, maintaining human dignity in increasingly automated services, ensuring inclusive excellence in space tourism, and adapting the principles for new forms of human interaction not yet imagined. Alexandra watched as a diverse group of passengers moved smoothly through the terminal, each receiving the same high level of service that had once been reserved for a select few. The sight confirmed what she had always believed, that true excellence wasn't about exclusivity, but about recognizing and respecting the dignity in every human being. 15 years ago, Alexandra addressed her gathered team, we set out to fix airline service. What we actually did was help change how society thinks about human dignity. The coffee-stained sweatshirt might be in a museum, but its legacy lived on in every respectful interaction, every welcoming space, and every person who refused to accept discrimination as normal. The sun set over the Rocky Mountains, casting a warm glow through the terminal's windows. Alexandra smiled, knowing that while their work had transformed millions of lives, the journey was far from over. The next generation was ready to take the principles of inclusive excellence to new heights, ensuring that dignity in service would continue to evolve and expand far into the future. Part 22, the next chapter. 20 years after Alexandra Reynolds first stepped into Denver International Airport in disguise, she stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly. The occasion was historic, the formal adoption of the Global Dignity Charter, a framework that would make inclusive excellence a fundamental human right. 2 decades ago, I put on a coffee-stained sweatshirt to understand why some passengers weren't receiving equal service, Alexandra began. Today, we're enshrining the principle that every human being deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and excellence in all aspects of life. The Charter represented a culmination of everything they had learned and achieved. Thomas Wright, who had helped draft the document, had ensured it incorporated lessons from every sector that had implemented the Skybridge Standard, The principles that began in airline service had evolved into a comprehensive framework for human interaction. "This isn't just about service delivery," Thomas explained to the assembled world leaders. "It's about recognizing that dignity in human interaction is as fundamental as any other human right." The Charter would commit nations to implementing inclusive excellence across all public services and encouraging its adoption in private sectors. Sarah Martinez, leading a global coalition of service organizations, presented compelling data from a 20-year longitudinal study. Countries that had embraced inclusive excellence principles showed measurable improvements in social cohesion, economic development, and citizen well-being. "The numbers tell a clear story," Sarah demonstrated. "When we eliminate discriminatory practices and maintain consistent excellence in service delivery, entire societies benefit." Her research had become the foundation for new economic theories about the relationship between service dignity and social progress. Victoria's design principles had evolved into the international standards for dignified spaces, a set of guidelines now used in everything from refugee camps to space habitats. Her work with NASA had ensured that human dignity would be a central consideration in the design of Mars colonies and lunar bases. "As we expand into space," Victoria shared, "we have the opportunity to build new worlds founded on the principle of universal dignity." Her latest project involved designing self-sustaining communities that would maintain inclusive excellence, even in the most challenging environments. Kevin Matthews's consistency protocols had become the backbone of the global service network, a system ensuring that dignity-based service standards could be maintained across all contexts and cultures. His work with artificial intelligence had created systems that could adapt these principles to any situation while maintaining their essential humanity. The most powerful moment came when Emma Martinez, who had grown up watching the transformation unfold, presented the youth implementation strategy. Her generation, raised with these principles, had taken them in directions nobody had anticipated. "We're not just maintaining what was created," Emma declared. "We're expanding it into new frontiers of human interaction." Her team had developed applications for emerging technologies like neural interfaces and quantum communication, ensuring that human dignity remained central as interaction methods evolved. James Chen's grandson, Dr. Michael Chen, now led the Global Dignity Institute's research division. His work focused on understanding how inclusive excellence principles could help humanity navigate the challenges of an increasingly automated and interconnected world. "My grandfather's experience in that airport lounge sparked a revolution in how we treat each other," Michael reflected. "Our work now is ensuring these principles guide us through the next great transformations in human society." Alexandra watched with pride as representatives from every nation signed the Charter. The ceremony was being broadcast globally, with live translations in hundreds of languages. In airports, train stations, and public spaces worldwide, people gathered to witness this milestone in human progress. The Charter's adoption would trigger a cascade of changes. Nations committed to implementing inclusive excellence training in all public services. Educational systems would incorporate dignity-based interaction principles into their core curriculum. International development programs would make service dignity a key metric of progress, but perhaps the most significant impact would be on future generations. Children growing up under the Charter would take for granted that every person deserved to be treated with equal dignity and excellence. The discriminatory practices that had once been common would become relics of history. As the ceremony concluded, Alexandra gathered with her expanded team in the UN's meditation room. They were joined by service leaders from around the world, each carrying forward some aspect of the transformation that had begun with one undercover investigation. 20 years ago, Alexandra reflected, we thought we were fixing a problem in airline service. What we actually did was help humanity recognize something fundamental about itself. That dignity isn't a privilege to be earned, but a right that belongs to everyone. The next phase of their work would focus on implementing the Charter's principles in emerging contexts: artificial intelligence ethics, space colonization protocols, and new forms of human connection not yet imagined. But the core principle would remain constant. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and excellence, not because of who they appear to be, but because of their inherent human worth. As evening fell over New York, Alexandra stood at the UN building's windows, watching the city lights come alive. The coffee-stained sweatshirt that had started it all was now a symbol in textbooks and museums, but its legacy lived on in every dignified interaction, every welcoming space, and every person who refused to accept discrimination as normal. The journey that began in an airport terminal had transformed into a global movement for human dignity, and while the story of that transformation would be told for generations to come, Alexandra knew that it was really just the beginning. The next chapter would be written by those who would take these principles even further, ensuring that dignity in human interaction would continue to evolve and expand far into humanity's future.